To start Part 54, Fairley says he doesn't need to explain the significance of the Washington Monument. Presumably he refers to the whole obelisk as a sexual symbol thing we already covered. We might add that the monument does serve the purpose of an obelisk as we've stated. It stands right at the axis of the nation's capital. Fairley adds a few other issues we need to consider, though. It's true the cornerstone was laid by Benjamin French, who is a Mason. Fairley also refers to aid in building the monument by Masons, and says hundreds of lodges contributed to the building of the monument, which contains 35 Masonic memorial stones. Well, not 35. More like 24 based on my own count of an archive listing contributors. That's out of a total of 193 memorial stones, which means Masons contributed only about 12%. That's not very impressive for a vast conspiracy, especially when you had a lot of stones contributed by groups like the International Order of Odd Fellows. Next, Fairley considers the measurements of the monument. The math is right, but the measurement isn't. It's actually 55 feet 1.5 inches, which makes it 661.5 inches. Maybe instead of the mark of the beast, it can be the neighbor of the beast. Here again, the math is right, but the measurement is wrong. Or maybe it isn't. Thing is, there's been more than one report of the height. According to the National Park Service, the monument's height has been variably reported between 555.43 feet and 555.75 feet. Maybe the monument is only the mark of the beast on weekends. Someone might say, yeah, but that's close on both counts, so someone was obviously up to something. Really? Like what? First of all, there's a good deal of the monument that's below the ground, which makes the actual height of the structure more like 592 feet. Second, we have to ask, what does Fairley think anyone was trying to accomplish by matching up the height, as he sees it, to the number of the beast? Does he think people will want to worship the beast because of it? Is this supposed to be some kind of subliminal advertising for Satan? Do you know anyone who's converted to Satanism because of these measurements? I don't. Like I said before, if this is some kind of conspiracy, it's got to be one of the dumbest ever reported. It gets worse for Fairley when he says that there are other measurements centered on the number 13 concealed within the structure, though he doesn't list any. Supposedly this connects to the use of the number 13 in Chaldean numerology. But how many people would know that or even care? Fairley tells us that the numbers themselves convey a message to the initiated. In this case, it's saying that America represents a change of plan and location, which would mean the change away from France, and that it will be a country of great power. Well, can I ask a really dumb question? Why would these initiated need the Washington Monument to get this information? Can't they just tell each other verbally? Or with signs? Or even talk in a corner somewhere? They obviously have to do something like that to tell each other what the numbers mean in the first place. So why bother spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in construction costs towards engineering a giant obelisk to relate the same message? Or is this some kind of weird, childish, haha, we know something you don't know game the initiated are playing with the rest of us? If that's what it is, I'd say let the conspiracy run its course. The so-called initiated are so dumb that they'll likely all soon die in some sort of freak accident involving a calculator. Next for Fairley's reckoning is the Statue of Liberty. We've already noted it's not an Asherah. On the other hand, it is indeed meant to resemble the Roman goddess Libertas, which, as we've also said, is a big deal only if you're worried about driving a Saturn automobile. Libertas, though, isn't the same as Asherah or Isis in spite of Fairley's claims. There's no historic or genetic connection between those goddesses. Really? Do whatever feels good and prostitution? Not that I've found. Freedom from dictators? Yes. Granting liberty to slaves? Yes. But what Fairley has in mind was called licentia, not libertas. Connections of libertas to prostitution are not found in any reliable source. That's generally the story except for the sun god part, which doesn't make sense anyway, since we've already been told by Fairley that she's Libertas and Asherah, who were not sun gods. There are also other interpretations of the spikes, but in the end we're reading the mind of the designer, who didn't make it clear what the 7 spikes were for. Such original plans are not mentioned by any reputable source. If it had been part of the plan, we'd expect to see it noted in works like historian Edwin Berenson's The Statue of Liberty, but he doesn't mention it. Not quite. There was a project suggested for Egypt, according to Berenson, but the figure was meant to represent progress, or Egypt carrying the light to Asia. It also wasn't for the opening of the Suez Canal, but for the south end of it, having already been built. It was proposed by Bartholdi in 1869, 2 years later. Well, it doesn't qualify as an idol as we described earlier. As for distance second, that's true. 98 feet versus 305 feet. Next on Fairley's list is the dollar bill. Fairley assumes the reader has a head start on this where the all-seeing eye is concerned. We should note to start that the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill has 3 sides around it, which as we saw earlier is the Trinity. Fairley connects this to an occult agenda, but he better check his Latin first. That's not one phrase, it's 2. The first one means he approves our undertakings, which is usually taken to mean God. The second one's closer to correct. It means New Order of the Ages, but this has to do with the founding of America as a nation with a sacred destiny, not some occult conspiracy. I hope Fairley really does mean coincidentally, because you can also string together a lot of words from the available letters depending on what you want to accomplish. Among the things I could pull out of the 2 mottos was the phrase, "Stop demons." Of course, this 13 couldn't have anything to do with 13 American colonies, could it? I'd say the same of the several 13s Fairley finds in the Great Seal. 13 colonies seems rather obvious, but Fairley never thinks of it. Next up is the Great Seal of America. We've already commented on the use of a hexagram. There's also no reason to accept Manly Hall's idea, appealed to by Fairley, that the eagle on the Great Seal is a conventionalized phoenix. Hall was just making that up. The count is right, but you might want to check the development of the seal over history. An 1877 version, for example, has the eagle bearing each wing with more than 33 feathers. It seems more likely the current enumeration has nothing to do with Freemasonry. The last part of this vid has to do with street design in Washington, D.C. Fairley is not the only one to find a pentagram in the street design of Washington, but this kind of thing has more to do with careful selection and starting with what you want than it does with any sort of evil plot. Pick whatever lines you want and you can find any shape you want, trapezoids, quadrilaterals, or even an origami ducky. In contrast, we need to start with a reason why diagonal streets were built in the first place. Here's what some reputable folks say about these. So, diagonals have a practical purpose. That they happen to form a pentagram is simply coincidental. That leaves this symbol. Fairley finds an owl in the design of the roads of the Capitol building from above. Seems more likely that these roads serve some sort of practical purpose, rather than that there was a secret message planned. But like I said, you often find what you want to find. Turn this picture one way and you'll see a ducky. Turn it upside down and it's a clothespin. And even the way Fairley has it, it could also be a rabbit. Frankly, I can see why he appeals to a Disney movie for an example, because that's what it takes to find an owl in the picture he uses. In close for this section, we have a little parody. One designed to illustrate just how easy it is to become paranoid and imaginative with a little symbol work, the way Fairley does.
Do you suppose those golden arches at McDonald's restaurant really stand for the M in the name McDonald's? The arch was known in the land of Babylon from ancient times dating back as early as 2020 BC. The accompanying illustration from Layler is described as the king standing in front of an arched frame. Now, as is well known, Nebuchadnezzar set up a golden image to be worshipped in Babylon. And Babylon itself was called the Golden City. Can there be the slightest doubt that then Babylon has golden arches? Is it a mere coincidence that a double arch forms the letter M, the 13th letter of the alphabet? 13 being widely regarded as an unlucky and occult number. After the M counting to the end of the alphabet, The remaining letters number exactly 13. For what does the letter M stand? Let one who was initiated into the Chaldean mysteries gaze upon it, and immediately he knows the M stands for Moloch, the fire god. Who else could Moloch be but Nimrod, who taught fire worship in Babylon? If we add the numbers of Babylon and Nimrod together, they total 13. Any more proof be needed? Consider that Nimrod was the king of Babylon. Molech signifies king, the king of heaven or the sun. And the sun has a golden color. Now Nimrod, who in his mystery poem was none other than the fish god Dagon, must have worn the fish head Mitri. Mitri begins with M, and even its shape resembles the M. We must not overlook the fact that the word mystery, the Chaldean mystery started by Nimrod, also begins with an M, as does the word Masonic. From ancient Babylon, the arch later came to Rome. There, to this day, the best preserved monument of ancient Rome is the Arch of Constantine, erected in 315 AD, a clear distinction of the Romish nature of memorial arches. It should be kept in mind that it was Constantine who presided over the Nicene Council just 10 years later. Now it is well known that McDonald's has served billions of hamburgers, requiring a large quantity of beef. When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they worshipped a calf. And what color was it? It was a golden calf! Can there be any doubt then as to the Babylonish nature of the golden arches?